Fantasy Football Podcast with John Impemba and Andrew Cooper.
What is going on, everybody? John Impemba here with Andrew Cooper. Welcome into the Quick Out Fantasy Football Show here on the Better Sports Network and Fantasy Alarm social channels. John Impemba here again with Coop. Coop, got a big day on hands, huh, man? How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. For those that didn't check the schedule, we have a very special guest today. Me being a huge tight end fan, we connected with a former John Mackey tight end award winner in college, a player that was drafted in the NFL, now works for Big Ten Network, Jake Butt. He's coming on second segment. John, why don't you give everybody a little rundown of what we got going on today?
Yeah, man, we're going to break down some ADPs for rookies, maybe do a little buy or sell at each position. Like I said, we'll have Jake Butt on the show talking about some fantasy football rookie tight ends who better qualified than someone that was once a rookie tight end in the NFL. And you and I are going to go back. We got, of course, our awesome fantasy football debate series out there, which we've discussed a couple of these rookies. So we're going to, Coop and I, go back and forth on that, hit up these positions, get you guys ready because it's fantasy football redraft season, man, right? It's time to go get your fantasy football leagues in order. If you don't already have your fantasy football draft guide, what are you waiting for here? The living draft guide is live on Fantasy Alarm. You see the QR code right there. You can go to fantasyalarm.com/draft guide and get it if you don't already have it. If you want it free, you simply have to sign up over at Fantasy Alarm. Become an all-pro member. Get it free. Comes with a 7-day free trial. Gets all the latest articles, rankings, and news updates as it happens. So go dominate your drafts. The cheat sheets live as well. Howard Bender pushing those updates as news happens. Get your auction values, your draft grid, all of your player rankings for your league styles, dynasty rankings, rookie rankings, seasonal, positional, you name it, it's all in there. So no better time than now, Coop, because again, fantasy football season, we are only a handful of Sundays away from kickoff, man.
Seriously, man. And I see people trickling into the chat. James Grande, JB Barry, lifetime member. He's obviously got the draft guide. Get your questions in the chat for Jake Butt or at other positions. We're going to hit on quarterback, running back, and wide receiver. Leave the tight end up to the expert tight end coming in. But honestly, this is the perfect time to do this because we're just starting August. We're not quite into your real hometown big league drafts, John. As you always point out, everyone should be pushing those off. I mean, Zeke Elliott, Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt, those guys aren't signed yet. So you want to push these drafts off. But we're far enough away from Dynasty where we need to really hit on the overlap here. People are still so hyped on these guys from Dynasty, expectations maybe get a little out of control. So we're talking today rookies for redraft. Who do we like? When is it appropriate to take these guys? And what should your realistic expectations be? Because during Dynasty season, the expectations are obviously insane. Everybody's Alvin Kamara, everybody's Justin Jefferson. Now we need to peel it back and say, hey, you know what? Even if these guys could become Justin Jefferson, right? Not everybody's Justin Jefferson their rookie year, right? Some of these guys takes a little time. So let's look at it and let's see who can do it this year and who maybe we want to stash in a keeper or dyno league, but maybe not draft and redraft.
Sure. Let's start off. We'll go quarterbacks here. Of course, me, myself, writing up a lot of the quarterback content here over at Fantasy Alarm for the draft guide, for seasonal, for DFS. Anthony Richardson is your top quarterback coming off the board right now. He's QB 16 for the rookie class, ADP 113.24. Of course, there was the fantasy football player debate article that went out there debating whether or not there was value in Anthony Richardson as a QB1 this season. Of course, you have Bryce Young going off at QB 25, CJ Stroud, QB 28, then a bunch of guys that could be backing up or maybe have opportunities to start at some point this season. Will Levis, Clayton Tune, Stetson Benton, maybe not Hendon Hooker after the recent signing there by the Lions. Dwayne Thompson-Robinson also likely needs an injury there to Deshaun Watson. But quarterbacks are here. Anthony Richardson, I think the biggest and most controversial, hot topic among rookie quarterbacks. Coop, where do you stand on the aisle of A. Rich this year?
To be honest, at first I was kind of questioning it, man, but you are the QB whisperer around here. I follow you. You've steered me away from certain nightmare situations, namely Baker Mayfield being one, and you've brought us to the promised land. I mean, we were drafting Jalen Hurts in every league, and I was confident in doing so because you were confident in doing so.
Yeah.
So this year on Anthony Richardson, I honestly might as well just pass it to you because most of the points that I have on this guy come from you, and a lot of it obviously tied to something that you've pointed out in the past is that people always talk about the mobile upside, but not enough attention being paid to the floor of mobility of these guys.
Yeah, listen, and you know, there's obviously some great research that's been done out there, but just from like my own personal experience, research, writing up these players, doing these articles here, yes, it doesn't take much for a quarterback that has a rushing potential here to be a guy that can put up top 10 fantasy football weeks. We saw Marcus Mariota do that 4 or 5 times last year, be a top 10 fantasy quarterback in leagues just because of his ability to run the football. So when you're looking at Anthony Richardson, he's being drafted outside the top 12, outside the top 14. So if you're in a standard league, you know, he's not even really be going as a QB1, but you can pair him up with a guy that I've done a lot with this year, like Kirk Cousins, and now you're mixing and matching. So you have a guy with some stability in Kirk Cousins with that potential breakout player in Anthony Richardson, because if he starts every game, it's almost a certainty that he'll be putting forth QB1 season. You know, I was tagged on Twitter following sort of our debate here that Ian Hartz, I know a guy that you've been a fan of, talked to him before, had him on your shows previously. He tweeted out a graph that pretty much every quarterback that had 100 plus carries since 2000, only 5 of them didn't finish within the top 12 of fantasy football finishing there. So I'm a big fan of Richardson, not just because of the rushing potential. I also do kind of like their offense a little bit here. I do like Michael Pittman as a wide receiver. We've seen Alec Pierce and Josh Downs making plays during training camp. We'll see what their running back position ends up looking like, whether it be a Jonathan Taylor or now maybe even Kareem Hunt finding his way over to there. But just the pure rushing upside gives him a fantasy floor. In the article that I wrote up this year, the example I used for sort of like what just a baseline number had to be last year to be a top 10 fantasy quarterback was Daniel Jones.
Right.
3,200 yards passing, only 15 passing touchdowns, but he ran for 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. It's a very low floor to pass the football when you have elite rushing upside. The top end, obviously, was Justin Fields, who threw for less than 3,000 yards last year, but ran for 1,200 or whatever it was, right? And he was a top 5 quarterback. So is he going to get that level? Probably not, but if he runs enough, he certainly can be. So that's why I'm willing to draft Anthony Richardson here in most formats this year.
Yeah, and especially in single QB, it's such a great year for it, because what I find that works really well for me in my regular redraft leagues is I reach for Richardson, especially if I'm drafting early. I reach for Richardson, and then there are just so many good, solid guys going in the QB2 range, right? Like it's so easy to just circle back and grab Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins or Jared Goff or Derek Carr or Russell Wilson. Like it's so easy to even if he doesn't start, then you just start Russell Wilson or somebody. So yeah, I don't mind that strategy there. After that, you're really kind of looking at 2 QB leagues for these other rookies. Let's say you're in a super flex league, John, you spent up on Jalen Hurts, you got your boy, and then now you are circling back and it's gotten pretty bleak, and sitting at the top of your queue is Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. If you're going to take one of those guys, which one do you take in that particular setup?
I mean, for me, it's probably Bryce Young, but again, I don't love. For me, it's more so like the offense is that they're set around here. Now, these are 2 bad football teams here. At least Carolina brought in some veteran talent to kind of help bolster, you know, the wide receiver group for them there. I do like that they brought in Miles Sanders as well to kind of take some pressure off. You know, so Young is probably the guy I end up going with, just because I don't think Houston might be picking first overall again this year. Like that, I mean, I don't think they're going to be a very good football team.
Yeah, they're with the Cardinals and a couple of these other teams where it's pretty clear when you look at Vegas numbers, odds, that they don't think this team's going to be good. And Toronto Dave says the yin and yang of QBs. Well, if you're into that kind of thing, I do. Those familiar with my yin and yang tight end system is a pairing system. On Fantasy Alarm in the draft guide, I did what's called dynamic tier rankings, which is basically just yin and yang for every position. We go through and we look at pairing risk and reward, and we do it with running back. You know, if you go 0 RB, what guys to target that are kind of safe that you can start week 1 versus guys that you might not be able to start but have crazy upside. We do that at every position now. So make sure you jump in there and check that out.
Yeah, Vegas is a little bit bullish on Carolina. Like we did the divisional breakdowns, and you know that NFC South is pretty wide open for like who could take that division. So if Vegas is right and Carolina is competitive, you got to think that the quarterback play there is going to be a reason for that. So I'd be more likely to take my shots there than in Houston.
Yeah, I'm 100% taking Bryce Young over CJ Stroud just because they went out and loaded up on weapons. How often do you see a team actually do that, John? Just completely replace every weapon on the team. If you
They
think
should.
about
That's how you win football games,
right.
right? Give talent to your players and hope they can succeed. Now, those players are DJ Chark and Adam Thielen. They could certainly be on there. DJ Chark's on his like third 1-year deal, and Adam Thielen's on his way out. But for 1 year, why not? Right? They could certainly get it. We have Jonathan Mingo.
You never see them replace everybody like that, right? Like all 3 wide receivers, brand new tight end in Hayden Hurst, brand new running back in Miles Sanders. Like they are just saying, here you go, man. Here are the keys to the car. So I definitely like that a little more. Let's before we pivot over to wide receivers, anybody else in any format that you're even stashing with this year in mind. So like obviously, there's like Will Levis and Hendon Hooker and guys like that. Is there anybody that you think could potentially start games this year, even if, it's not the best situation?
I mean, Stetson Bennett probably could, right? I mean, we don't know what Matt Stafford's going to look like. We think he's falling apart, and we'll see how healthy that arm looks, or that back holds up. Like the way that quarterback situation ended for the Rams last year. I'm not very high on the Rams this season for that reason. Like, I just don't know what Stafford has left. He kind of gave it all for that Super Bowl here, and he could be a guy that finds his way into starting some games this year. But I don't think any of these remaining guys become fantasy relevant. I know Will Levis obviously has the cannon of the arm. They brought in DeAndre Hopkins.
That fifth guy on the list there, Clayton Tune. What if he starts for Arizona?
What are your thoughts with the reports for Kyler? Like, they think Kyler's pushing to be ready early. Like, is he going to be worthy of a stash if Kyler's ready to go this year and Colt McCoy's there?
Of course not. You drop him immediately if he doesn't start. If Colt McCoy starts over in week 1, you drop him immediately in all formats. But the thing is, that's why you hold just to see, because sometimes those guys pop for a little bit of value. I mean, look at Davis Mills. And if I'm Kyler Murray, I'm doing the exact thing that he's saying right now. I know that in the back of everybody's mind is what happens if the team stinks and they end up with the top pick and they get Caleb Williams. I'm putting it out there right now. If I'm Kyler Murray, I'm ready to play. They're not putting me on IR, or they're not fading me with injuries that I don't have.
Right.
If I'm available, I'm playing, and we're winning, and no one's getting Caleb Williams. Like, that's what I'm doing if I'm Kyler. So I think he's doing it the right way. Yeah. But anyway, let's jump into some wide receivers.
Yeah, for sure. Over at the wide receiver position here, obviously some big names, a lot of fantasy hype surrounding some of these guys here. Jackson Smith and Jigba, obviously, just edging Jordan Addison in recent ADP updates there over on FFPC. Quentin Johnson, Zay Flowers, Rashid Rice, Jonathan Mingo, Marvin Mims, Jaden Reed, Jalen Hyde, and Josh Downs. They're kind of cropping it over. Talk to me about where you're going when it comes to this rookie class.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with the draft capital, you kind of have to split hairs. Nobody went like 4 overall or 10 overall. They went, 20, 21, 22, 23. So for me, Jackson Smith and Jigba, there's a ton of hype on him. He might just end up falling in the class of just too good to take off the field, at which case you turn to Tyler Lockett. And, at that point, Tyler Lockett might even say, hey, you know what? We got to do what's best for the team. But I just worry a little bit that we're going to see, at least at the start, what we saw with the Buccaneers, where it was Mike Evans was the guy at split end, and Deshaun Jackson was the flanker, and Chris Godwin for the first couple of years wasn't playing a full snap share. Even though he looked great when he was out there, he didn't quite earn that full snap share. He was the next man in, first man out, especially in red zone. Yeah. I worry that maybe JSN starts off like that. But, I mean, at his ADP, he's worth a stab. I think most of these guys are. The one that I'm steering away from a bit is Quentin Johnston, just because I think the draft pick of him was a little bit reactionary. They saw last year that Keenan Allen and Mike Williams really only played 2 games together. Virtually every other game, one of them either was out or got hurt during the game. There was 2 games there where they both played the whole time. And I think the team sat back and said, you know what, let's just go out and grab this guy. But there's a world where those guys don't get hurt, right? So he ends up being the third fiddle to a certain degree, not to mention Austin Eckler guy himself that commands 90 to 100 targets already, right? And Gerald Everett probably the odd man out too, but he's no slouch either. So feeding him a little bit. Of the other 2 top dogs, first round guys, John, you like Zay Flowers better, or you like Jordan Addison better?
I mean, I like Jordan Addison better because I feel like the snap share is more guaranteed. Now, listen, I think Zay Flowers can be a very dynamic player in that Baltimore offense, but is he going to immediately go out there and be their number one guy? Like, they do have OBJ who's out there making plays in camp. They have Bateman. Like, they have Mark Andrews, obviously, as a pass catcher. If Flowers can earn those wide receiver one snap shares, and sure, I think there's a good chance for him there. But at least I know Jordan Addison is going to be on the field, right? It's going to be Jefferson, Addison, and Hawkinson. Those are going to be the three guys on the field for the Vikings. So to your point with Jackson Smith and Jigba, like, Lockett and DK Metcalf are going to be the guys on the field a lot of the time. Now, obviously, he's going to be on the field too. He'll have a good snap share, but you just have to wonder if he's going to be the wide receiver 3. Like you said, is he out there for 60 to 70 instead of 90 plus? And that's where you got to kind of figure out where they're going to go. So
big difference maker. It's a big difference maker.
Right. So listen, I think Flowers could be an immediate impact in that offense if they give him the opportunity to do so right away. But for me, I know Addison's at least going to be on the field.
Yeah, I'll give you a one little boost for Zay Flowers. I have Addison ahead as well. But one little boost for Zay Flowers is I just saw a report the other day that they took Patrick Ricard, the fullback, and they're pretty much having him exclusively work out with the offensive line. To see, he actually played a decent amount in that like inline Nick Boyle type role. So it seems that this new air raid offense not using they're not going to be using the fullback anymore, which means a lot more 3 wide receiver sets.
Well, they want to spread the offense and throw downfield, right? That's been the idea behind what they're doing here. So one of the reasons I like Flowers, but again, I definitely am a fan of him. Kansas City wide receivers are obviously getting a big boost here. Rashee Rice, are you buying into him here, or does he kind of fall into the, everybody liked Sky Moore last year too, and he basically redshirted? Where do you find Rice, and are you looking at the second half of this rookie wide receiver tier?
Yeah, I mean, dude, with this group, everybody seems to be so far out on these second-round rookies, and they weren't really drafted that far off from the first-round guys. Like, I'm higher than most on Mingo, Reed, and Rashee Rice. Not really so much Marvin Mims, just because I think that they have incumbent pass catchers there. But like Rashee Rice, everyone wants him to be Tyreek Hill, but he doesn't really have the speed. But everything else is good. And where he's great is contested catches. I mean, this guy led all drafted rookies last year in contested catches. He's a guy kind of like, to me, like he could be a Keenan Allen or a DeAndre Hopkins type guy as a ceiling. But paired with Patrick Mahomes, why can't this team just hit one time on a wide receiver, right? Like, it's almost like the Patriots where we say, oh, whoever they draft, we're just going to fade them no matter what. But what if they just hit on a guy? It could be that case. And same with a guy like Jonathan Mingo. He's got all the opportunity in the world on a team that nobody's played with this quarterback before. And honestly, besides Terrace Marshall, none of them have even been on the team. So I'm willing to take stabs there. Jaden Reed, kind of the same thing. The floor is lower, but at the ADP, these guys are all like, we're talking Mingo is 163, Reed 200, Rice 150. These guys are being drafted onto your bench, right? They either hit or they don't. You can easily drop them.
Yeah, I mean, you're the king of the lottery ticket versus scratch ticket, right? I mean, you can draft them early, find out week 1, hey, how much do they play on the field? What's their impact in this offense? If they're not out there, if they're playing special teams and not out there in, wide sets, you drop them, you go to the waiver wire, you make an ad and find someone that can immediately impact your roster. Or you find out, hey, this guy is getting on the field in those 3 wide receiver sets. He is seeing a 50 to 60% target share right away. He is getting 4 to 5 targets, and now maybe you hold them on and see, okay, can he overtake some of the incumbent veterans that are ahead of him on that roster? Now, all of a sudden, he's making an impact on your fantasy squad.
Bingo, dude. So after that, 3rd round, we got Tank Dell. If you pull the graphic back up, Tank Dell, Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, Josh Downs, Michael Wilson, and Trey Tucker, who I personally, he went in the comp pick range. I think he's probably more of a special teams guy, especially because of what the Raiders have over there. But of those other guys, I know there's one that you've been really pounding the table for. So why don't you tell us about Jalen Hyatt? I'm not going to ask who you like best because I know it's Jalen Hyatt.
I was going to say, you kind of spoiled the lead there for me. I do like Jalen Hyatt. Again, it's obviously ADP comes into a big play of it. When it comes to best ball right now, you're looking for guys that can have maybe those pop weeks here. But I also look at opportunity, right? And when it comes to Jalen Hyatt here, I look at the depth chart for the New York Giants and say, is there really a big skill gap between what they have in front of him versus what he can bring to the table in this offense? With Sterling Shepard, Paris Campbell, Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodges, like all those guys we know have been productive at times, but they've also been very inconsistent, or the injury bug has gotten, Paris Campbell and obviously Sterling Shepard notably here. So why not take a shot with Jalen Hyatt in the last pick for your draft or late rounds of your draft? Because like you said, he's been making some plays in camp. Now I understand running in shorts, running against your own defense isn't always the end-all be-all here, but they used their 3rd round draft capital on him. He's shown obviously the ability to make some plays at college. I'm willing to take a flyer on him in the late rounds and see if he can be that lottery ticket and not just a scratch ticket for me.
Yeah, for sure, man. After that, there's a couple of names I'll just throw out quick before we get to our special guest here. Michael Wilson is a guy, when you really look around the Cardinals setup there, now that they've cut DeAndre Hopkins, he is just built totally different than the other guys. He's got, if you look at, Rondale Moore, Marquise Brown, Greg Dortch, he's got 30 pounds on the biggest one of them, and he's got 4 inches height wise on the biggest one of them. So he could easily be the split end right away for that team. And I also throw out the name Puka Nacua. He was a 5th round pick, but the Rams, man, they had a 0 for an offseason, right? They did nothing. They didn't add anybody. They didn't have any picks. So he could just by default end up carving out a role here. But anyway, enough about wide receivers. Let's move on to my favorite position. And to hammer that out, we are going to bring on a special guest here. We are bringing in Jake Butt. Bring him on in. This is a guy who won the Mackey Award for the best tight end in college football. He's a Wolverine. He got drafted by the Broncos. Now at the Big Ten Network as an analyst. Jake, how you doing, brother?
Thanks. What's up, fellas?
Right on, Jake. Thanks for joining us today, man.
Yeah. Great to join you guys. I'm excited. When I was playing, I didn't ever do fantasy football. So then once I retired from playing, I played the last 2 years, and I've won my league the last 2 years. So maybe that's beginner's luck. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I'm loving it, man. It's so much fun.
Hey, you're plugged in, dude. That's the secret, right? And that's why we're bringing you in, because we can talk all day about average depth of target and all these nerdy stats, but why not just talk to somebody who's actually been in the locker room?
Yeah.
Right. So the first question I wanted to ask you is, the tight end position notoriously in fantasy has been a difficult one for guys to break out right away. Right. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of guys that, down the road, a guy like Delaney Walker, he was like 30 years old when he had his first 1,000-yard season.
Yeah.
So why is it so hard compared to say wide receiver or running back for tight ends to make an impact with the ball in their hands early on?
Yeah. So if you just think about it, of the demand of the tight end position and how much that changes from college to the NFL level. In college, we're seeing more hurry up, less huddles. Tight ends are almost becoming a glorified receiver, whereas the NFL, it still fits more that traditional model. You're huddling much more often too. So as a tight end, you basically are an extension of the offensive line. So you have to know the blocking schemes. You have to know those calls. You also have to know route concepts, not just on the line, off the ball, in the slot, as solo receivers. And then occasionally you line up in the backfield and help with pass protection. That's not even counting the fact that you're going to be on all 4 special teams. So the sheer quantity of information you have to learn in just a tight little period, I think guys they can't catch their breath, and they come into camp and they're thinking so much, and it takes a little bit of time to really absorb everything that is being asked of them before they can even go out there and excel, right? Then the other piece is knowing what you're doing and actually winning in the NFL, which is a challenge in and of itself. So it takes time for guys to get into a rhythm and fully grasp that. And then, like you mentioned, I think they say like year 3 is usually a great year for tight ends. You get your feet wet year 1, you're a little bit stabilized year 2, and then by year 3, you're ready to roll. So I think it's the mental side of the game that is what makes it so challenging for guys to hit the ground running. I benefited, in my career. I played for Jim Harbaugh type system. So when I went to the NFL and I was learning a playbook, it was easy for me. But I played with guys that didn't have that experience, and I saw how that affected them in terms of their preparation as well.
Yeah, some of those offenses, they call plays by like holding up a picture of like a duck, and like that's and when you get to the next level, it gets a little spike. Can I ask real quick, Jim Harbaugh, the quotes from that guy, like does he have some sort of book where he just has a million amazing quotes, or is that just the way he is?
Actually, no, he did have a quote board. He was building a quote board when we first got there of, all his major quotes, like more is more. There's no such thing as less is more. There was one where the hurt guy, the injured guy, the lazy guy, and the late guy, they're all the same. They're all unaccountable, So he was building out all these boards of great coaching points. So frankly, I mean, there wasn't one I disagreed with on there either. I mean, the one thing about Jim is he's a little bit quirky, but fact of the matter is, he wants to win. And if you want to win, just hop on board. He'll take you there.
I think my favorite one was he said, you can't, when asked about like developing players, he said, you can't expect to plant potatoes today and eat potato salad tomorrow.
Beautiful. There you go. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Jake, they obviously have a lot of tight ends coming in this year that the fantasy community is pretty high on, some of them being hyped up for what roles they could have in the offense. When it comes to rookie tight ends this year, which ones do you think may be making an immediate impact when it comes to the passing game this year?
Yeah, I think Dalton Kincaid. So I see that right there at the bottom. You know, what about Dalton Kincaid? I've seen clips coming out of him out of Buffalo. The dude's so fluid. We knew that as well just from his tape. He is a Travis Kelce type in the sense that a very natural pass route runner, really knows how to set up his routes. His change of direction is great. He's got the top high level speed, but it looks effortless. It doesn't look like he's straining to run routes, which allows him to create that separation. Excellent hands too, really, really reliable hands. So I think he benefits from being in a great offense. So I imagine Josh Allen is targeting him often. It's again, the question is how much do you want to reach for these guys? You know, like what's the value over replacement when it comes to fantasy? Another one that I really like, and maybe he might be the best rookie out of all this with everything considered, Sam Laporta, the guy in Detroit. I've been high on him. I actually had him as my highest rated tight end. And to go back to how we started the show, he played at Iowa. That's an NFL system, right? Go watch his film last year. He lined up all over the field as a receiver, slot, wide tight end, F tight end, in the backfield. So whatever Detroit wants to use him as, he's going to be capable of doing it. So, and again, that they need a tight end, right? They got rid of Hawkinson last year. Insert your next Iowa tight end there. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him catching 50 balls this year.
Let's go. I mean,
Kincaid,
Laporta, those are my boys. Where do I Venmo you or send the Bitcoin to? You know, I to slide you money for propping up my fellas.
Moving ADPs is what Jake is doing right now with his
I'll send you my Bitcoin wallet after the show.
Okay, yeah, thank you. As we agreed, you would promote my guys, right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah, of course.
So you know, those guys obviously, as you mentioned, right? If they're going to, if it's going to be a split role and there's going to be, they have to learn the blocking scheme, the pass catching scheme. Obviously, if we're going to sacrifice one part of the role, we'd be fine letting Dawson Knox do the blocking and do things like that. As far as guys that you like the profile, but they might be on that 3-year trajectory, they might need to wait for some guys to leave, either tight ends or also wide receivers that kind of soak up a lot of targets. Who are some guys that you like more on like the long-term typical tight end trajectory?
Honestly, one that, and this is hard to pick, right? Both those guys I like long-term as well. Like it's not a guarantee they're going to perform this year. Both those guys I just mentioned, but one that I think's real sneaky, real quiet is Luke Musgrave out there in Green Bay. It's hard for me to know, like, how good is Jordan Love? Will they be able to convert third downs and keep their offense on the field? If it's Aaron Rodgers, I'm like, man, Musgrave might be a great pick there. And remember, he was injured too. So how healthy is he? It takes a little bit of time to get back into rhythm. So I like Luke Musgrave. And then honestly, man, Luke Schoonmaker down in Dallas. It's a long history of them involving their tight ends. And he has a chance to perform, probably not 50 catches this year, but that's capable in the Cowboys offense, right? We have seen that be a potential. And I think Schoonmaker is a guy who was extremely underrated. He was a second-round pick, if I'm not mistaken. So long-term, I'd have my eyes on him, see how they use him this year and start to say, hey, maybe I want to involve Schoonmaker with my team.
You're not just saying that because he's a Michigan guy?
Well, I mean, of course, I know Michigan pretty well, but I'm saying that just out of a fact, man. He's a damn good tight end.
Awesome.
We got a lot of obviously players here that do dynasty fantasy football, Devy leagues here. Talk to me about some tight ends that maybe we should have on our radar coming out of college.
There's one name. There's one name, and I'm sure you guys have talked about it a bunch. Not even just a tight end, but like maybe the best at doing his job out of anybody in the draft next year. It's the Georgia tight end, Brock Bowers. Whoever's going to draft him, I mean, he has a chance to be a top 5 pick. And if a team's going to invest a top 5 pick, he's going to catch 50 passes and maybe take some jet sweeps. He did it at Georgia. We've seen the 49ers do it with Kittle. Whoever picks him next year, like that's an easy pick. I don't feel like you'd be reaching for him at all. I bet he might just walk into being a top 5 fantasy tight end his rookie year.
Yeah. What makes him so good? Like what, obviously, you talked about the jet sweeps and the athleticism, but is it separation? Is it hands? Like what separates him from everybody else?
if we talk about a number of tight ends, we could say, hey, he's really good at this, but maybe he can improve here. Hey, he's a specialist in this. Brock Bowers, what makes him so good? Since he walked in the league as a freshman, he was a freshman. And had he been eligible, had he been allowed to leave after his freshman year, he would have been a first-round pick as like an 18-year-old. He doesn't have a weakness in his game. It's not like he's great at this and just fine at this. He's a great blocker. He can line up all over the field. Soft hands. Great after the catch as well, right? That's why they're giving him jet sweeps. He's a complete package. Like he plays the game like an 8-year NFL vet, even though he's a junior in college. So, and again, Georgia lines him up. It's a similar pro style system. So he's going to be able to have a fluid transition to the next level. I mean, the dude is I'd have to dive into it and look at the history, but I don't feel like it's a hot take to say he's the best tight end prospect to ever enter the NFL draft next year.
Wow, that's crazy, especially because
Kyle Pitts was a top 10 pick 2 years ago, right? So
listen, so Pitts is a great tight end, right? I think they're completely different though. Pitts ran a low 4.4, kind of like an Evan Ingram. Let Pitts line. Don't put Pitts at the Y and expect him to block a 6 technique throughout the game. The Chiefs don't do that with Kelsey. Watch how they ask Kelsey to block. A lot of it is smoke and mirrors. So instead of just saying block this guy, you accomplish the same thing of influencing the defender through deception. That takes a high level offensive mind. Pitts, what he's good at is going to be different than a number of other guys. Let him do what he's good at. Now you got to find him a quarterback to put the ball on him. I think Bowers is more of a traditional tight end, though he still has that athleticism, where Pitts is more your modern day, like super burner, closer to a receiver than a traditional Y tight end. So again, they're different. There's different ways to succeed in finish games, but they're both great. I think Brock Bowers is just a little bit more complete.
I've been saying that for years with Evan Ingram, where people would come to me and they're talking about who to comp the guy to. He ran a 4.42, so I'm like, we should be comparing him to like Demaryius Thomas and like Andre Johnson, and that's how they should use him. When I was banging my head against the wall when the coach from the Cowboys came in, Jason Garrett came in and was trying to use him like Jason Witten. I was like, what are we doing here? What are we doing?
No, I coaches like, okay, he's labeled as a tight end. Okay, what does that mean? What do you mean he's labeled as a tight end? Like, dude, no, he ran a 4.42. He's faster than most of your receivers. He can run routes like a receiver. Why not just put him at receiver? Like, he's not going to sit there and block a 6 tech. Though he's not going to block Myles Garrett. That's bad coaching. But if you put him in the slot against a linebacker and a safety, that's a great matchup. That's great coaching. So again, I think sometimes like coaches, they can put things into a box. They have a lot going on in their head, so it's understandable why they have to compartmentalize things. I just think Evan Ingram's such a weapon. The more you can use him and what he's good at, the more it benefits everybody.
Yeah, Adam Gase did that with Mike Gesicki too. He had him blocking on like 20% of the pass plays. It was just some of these guys.
They just him to do that. Why did you draft him to do that?
Right. Well, speaking of players to draft, I want to ask. You pretty much just laid out the best 15 minutes on tight ends that we've ever heard on here, to be honest. So thank you for coming in doing that. I want to ask you. Now you're a Big Ten analyst, man. That is so cool, dude. To go back, we're in a spot you're already plugged in with. So let me ask you, what else, as far as other positions, wide receivers, quarterbacks, running backs, what's coming out of that conference or just in general across the league? What are you excited for that players that you think can really translate to fantasy football? Because that's what our audience really cares about. They want to know. They do play the Devy leagues, and we even had a draft on this network for actual college fantasy football. But for the most part, we want to know who's coming up next and how can they make an impact for our dynasty team.
The best wide receiver prospect we've had in a very long time is Marvin Harrison Jr. out of Ohio State. And similar to how we talk about tight ends coming out of Iowa, one thing we know about Ohio State is they're going to have their receivers NFL ready. Again, Marvin Harrison Jr. would have been a top 15 pick this year, but he was only a sophomore. So he's got to come back and he'll prove it again this year, maybe be a top 10 pick, even higher. They got another guy in Emeka Egbuka out of Columbus too, who I think that's the best and the second best receiver in all of college football. So those are two great receivers that I'd be targeting just out of history. I know whoever drafts those guys, similar to what we see with Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, we could go all the way down the list. It's a long line of great receivers to come out of Ohio State that understand the nuance of route running and how to create separation. So those are two great picks that I would feel very good at. The hard thing is with rookies is, are they going to be better than a proven vet? And those two, I would say right away, could solidify themselves. Marvin Harrison, maybe even a ceiling as a top 5 receiver his rookie year, like Justin Jefferson. Ibuka, maybe he's top 15, maybe higher, maybe he's top 20, whatever it is. Then you still have some running backs. I think running backs is a good position as well. Donovan Edwards out of Michigan provides some great value. I know Blake Corum is going to be the number 1 guy, but what Edwards can do catching the ball out of the backfield, he'd be a great slot receiver anyways. And in the right system, I mean, look at Eckler. I drafted Eckler both my 2 years. I get so many points from him getting check downs. That's a huge part in the NFL, man, that you have 3 seconds to get rid of the ball. If the routes aren't developed, check it down to a running back. So I like Edwards, and then Braylon Allen, another guy out of Wisconsin. I expect him to leave after this year as well. So but I feel less confident in saying I'd stretch for those guys as I would for Harrison and Ibuka.
Yeah, I want to point out somebody in the chat here saying, let's see, get Jake in the Scott Fish Bowl. So that's actually a big tournament with like 3,000 analyst fans, and there's even some, former professional athletes like Des Bryant's in it, a few different guys.
Okay.
Next year we got to get you in, man. What do you think? Dude?
Sure, I'd love to. Oh, that sounds awesome. Okay. I'll
send you the sign up link, and we'll talk to Scott.
Okay, great.
We'll see if we can get it done. Because I mean, hey, if you're getting in fantasy football, this is the tournament to be in. This is the one.
Great. Yeah,
you win this
I
one
play with
man.
my buddies, so I mean, it's like a 12-man league, so I can't really. I've never lost, but I will never be able to know how good I am until I get to a 3,000 person league. So I'd like to do that.
Here's how this one goes down. You draft with 12 people and play a league until week 13, and then the top dogs from each league get put into the next level.
Okay.
And then the top people go next level until one person is crowned the champ. And I mean, if you win that tournament, you are gold plated, because I mean, you're playing against Matthew Berry, you're playing against John Impemba here, you're playing against pretty much anybody who's anybody in this industry.
Yeah.
So
plus it also helps Fantasy Cares, right? Great organization.
It's a charity tournament. It's
perfect. Even better. I'd love, reach out to me, please. So and reach out to me throughout the season, man. It's good hanging out with you guys. Would love to hang out again. So
yeah, listen, we've had a lot of people in chat clamoring for the the Jake Butt Fantasy podcast. So I got to ask you, what do you got going on? Where can people find you? Obviously on the Big Ten Network. Maybe a fantasy podcast coming soon.
Maybe so. I probably should. I got a lot going on, man. I call games on the weekends. I do studio and radio for Big Ten Network, Sirius XM, a network called Stadium. So it's a pretty busy season. But I post a lot on social media. I think you guys can see my tag there. You can just search my name, Jake Butt. It should be Jay Booty on all platforms. And I'm posting a lot of, free game on social media, and I interact, man. You guys DM me, you ask me questions. I do interact. I respond. I make videos on what you guys want to hear from. So that's a big piece of it. I'm on social media and active.
Man of the people. All right, dude. Well, we're going to take everything you just said. We're taking it and we're running with it. We're going to get you in the Scott Fish Bowl. We're going to try and get you back on later on, man. And we're going to be following you on Twitter and following you on weekends, man. Talking about ball in the Big Ten, dude. That's awesome, buddy.
Yeah, man. I'm one of the lucky ones. I don't have a job. I've been able to monetize what I love to do. So thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jake. Again, go give him a follow, JBooty88 on Twitter. Go find him on the Big Ten Network there as well. Jake, good talking to you. We'll see you then.
All right, guys.
Boss. What a dude, man.
Yeah, what a dude. Great having him on, talking some tight ends. Gotta love the Sam Laporta hype there.
My favorite part.
You've been touting pretty heavily there. Everybody's in on the Dalton Kincaid, but Sam Laporta, like we talked about, could have just that immediate impact that we've heard, because you look again, all but opportunities. Look at that Lions offense, right? What do they have? They have Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then they have what? Because Jameson Williams suspended. Right, so they brought in Marvin Jones. They have some other guys there that obviously like Josh Reynolds or something like that could come in. But who's to say that Sam Laporta can't immediately come in? That number 2 target in that offense till Williams comes back
right away, man. I'll tell you what, with the options of Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Sam Laporta, that offense is going to be death by 1,000 cuts. Like if you don't have the right personnel in there covering these guys, mixing and matching in the slot out wide, it's going to be a nightmare for teams that don't have fast linebackers and fast safeties. If I'm in that division, you got to be making some sort of adjustments because that's what Jared Goff does best. And they just leaned into it. They said, let's just get all these weapons. And if Jameson Williams could take the top off, come back, week 7 and start taking the top off, that's going to be pretty scary, man. That this team, they built it the right way.
Yeah, taking a look at some of the ADPs at the tight end position here for fantasy football. Dalton Kincaid is that first tight end off the board for the rookies there. Tight end 13, Sam Laporta coming off of tight end 18. Michael Mayer there, tight end 27. Musgraves, who we mentioned. Schoonmaker, who we mentioned there. Cube, obviously you're the tight end whisperer here. You do all the tight end work. You have Laporta over Kincaid, or are you still looking to go Kincaid over Laporta?
I have Kincaid ahead simply because of what I mentioned there, where if you talk about the competition for the particular types of targets, there's just more of it for Laporta, I think. And the thing with Laporta is that he might actually fall in redraft, unfortunately, into the same category as like a Clayton Tune, where if say week 1, we'll give him past week 1, but say week 1 comes around, he's not playing a 60-70% snap share, or especially week 3 or 4. If he gets to week 3 or 4 and he's not playing a full snap share, do we actually expect it to be better when Jameson Williams comes back?
Right.
He's the guy that he needs to prove it right away because it's only going to get worse, right? Whereas Dalton Kincaid, he's going right. And Brandon Beane came out on Pat McAfee's show and straight up said this guy's playing slot. So I'm tired of hearing people say he's a backup to Dawson Knox. That is factually untrue from the guy that drafted him.
Right.
He straight up said these guys are playing together. This guy plays wide receiver. Right. And a 30, 31, 32-year-old Cole Beasley had back-to-back 100 target seasons in that slot role for Josh Allen. So it's absolutely within the range of outcomes for that guy to get 100 targets right now. And you can start him at tight end, which is amazing. And Jake Butt, if you don't like it, Jake Butt just came on and agreed with me. So everybody out there can shut up.
Yeah, exactly. And I loved his shout for Austin Eckler. Obviously, few bigger fans than Austin Eckler than I. Took him first overall in leagues last year. Guy's been a league winner for 2 straight years, which is a great transition to talk about some rookie running backs.
Let's get RBs going. This is the fun one, right?
Burying the lead, obviously the most important fantasy position, or had been the most important fantasy position. You see, obviously ADPs and now moving more towards the wide receiver with these running backs getting pushed down the board by Bijan Robinson, your RB3 first rookie running back off the board coming at the end of the first round. Jahmyr Gibbs, you did the anti-Jahmyr Gibbs take. Britt Flynn did the pro-Jahmyr Gibbs take in our player debate series that was released yesterday. Zach Charbonnet, your top 3 running backs for rookies coming off the board right now.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this, the running back, the reason it's so exciting as rookies is that, Jake came on to talk about tight ends and how important situation is. For wide receivers and running backs, that doesn't matter as much. And you can get such crazy discounts on running back because sometimes guys get hurt and they just come out of nowhere because we didn't expect the starter to get hurt. And the other is that sometimes they just flat out are so good that they come out of nowhere and force their way into the field. I mean, Alvin Kamara, the reason everyone loved him so much and why he was such a, such a hot commodity is that he was behind Mark Ingram and Adrian Peterson. So his ADP was buried and he came out and was an RB1. Mark Ingram was also still an RB1. So not crazy for 2 guys to do it, but that at running back, like Elijah Mitchell, James Robinson, it just happens in a way that it doesn't happen in other positions, right, John?
Yeah.
Like Anthony Richardson, it's baked in. Like we're taking him at a level and we don't really expect, like, that's not going to happen. Sorry to break everyone's hearts here, but probably not going to happen for rookie Will Levis, even if somebody gets hurt, to just come out and just be the dude.
Yeah,
right?
It's rare, right? Justin Herbert did it, right?
Very rare.
It's very rare for a guy
Deshaun
like that
Watson,
to move in.
probably the closest maybe. And even him, people were looking at him and saying, why not? Right. So, but with running back, you can get that. So I'm willing to take Bijan if he's back end first round, but and even towards the middle, but somebody just takes him. People take him like 3, 4
Are you taking
overall.
Bijan or Saquon Barkley?
See, that's the problem, is that if you rank Saquon, you're splitting hairs at that level. If you rank Saquon ahead of Bijan, you'll never get Bijan. And I honestly, at times, have taken Saquon ahead. So it makes it very difficult for me to get him. And even Nick Chubb, I look at it and I'm like, do I want to even play this game or just want to take Nick Chubb, who I know is awesome?
For me, it's almost like an opportunity cost, because if you're drafting at the end of the first round and you have sort of that ranking, the elite wide receivers are there at that end of the first, early turn as well. So it's like, if you want to get a wide receiver, you're settling on, okay, I take the running back first and hope one of the wide receivers fall, or you kind of get your pick of the wide receivers and then hope that Jonathan Taylor or Saquon Barkley are still there at the turnaround, and now you get your number one wide receiver and your running back there. Kind of how I've approached it if I've gone the wide receiver early there.
Yeah. Now the beauty of Bijan and why I'm willing to take him, it just at the right spot, is that we know that in that room he's the best at everything. Right? He's the best rusher. He's the best pass catcher. Tyler Algier, great. He's a very solid player. But, I think if you ask Tyler Algier himself, like Kerryon Johnson said it about DeAndre Swift even. He was like, I can't learn anything from DeAndre Swift because I can't do the things. My hips don't do the things that his hips do, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes that's how it goes. And with Bijan, I think that is the case. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs, I don't mind him, again, if I get him at the right price. But he's just been steamed up so far that I'm on underdog right now at this moment. He's going as an RB1. He's going like RB12.
Yeah, he's RB11 right now in FFPC. So
11, man. 11. And like we know when we look at it, right? And this is the example I'd always give. If there's a pass interference in the end zone, Jameson Williams screaming down the field, gets taken down, they get to send whoever they want down there to punch that in. David Montgomery has 25 pounds on Jahmyr Gibbs. So Jahmyr Gibbs needs to be incredibly special for them to come in and put him in that spot. And people will say, oh, well, they spent the high draft capital on this guy. But they forget that they gave David Montgomery the second highest free agent running back contract. Miles Sanders got $6.25 million. David Montgomery got $6 million. So it's like, to make that argument, you have to say, okay, well, they don't want to waste the draft capital, but they're willing to waste the money. I'd argue that as a GM, you're probably a little more worried about wasting the money, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, for me, they signed obviously Montgomery ahead of. Now, I'm sure they had a plan in the draft to go after Gibbs. They tweeted out all their workout videos for him. Yeah. Had him in. They loved every meeting. They loved everything about it, and obviously they prioritized him in the draft. So I have to imagine they got Montgomery with the idea, looking forward that they probably wanted to go ahead and make a move at the running back position in the draft.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let me just point one thing out. That I tell you that. If they didn't sign David Montgomery, then maybe they would have just taken their guy at 6. They did illustrate that they were willing to risk it. They were willing to risk not getting Bijan or Gibbs by moving back in the draft. So, they traded from a high-end pick to a mid-round pick. I mean, 12, I would even say, is a high-end pick.
Yeah.
So, the expectation is for him to be good, but it's just there are too many guys in that range. Like you talking about pass catching. For me, Joe Mixon, he was on pace for 91 targets last year, and he's going after Gibbs, and Samaje Perine's gone.
Yeah.
Right. So I have a hard time taking him because of the people around him, but there's no question his upside is amazing. He could be Alvin Kamara.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I've ventured more into like Ramondre Stevenson over Jahmyr Gibbs if I've been sort of drafting in that range. Nick Chubb over Jahmyr Gibbs if I've been in that range for ADPs. At times around the board, but I do think he's an exciting player because we do talk a lot about how receptions are worth more in fantasy football in PPR and half PPR leagues. And I don't believe he's going to be a zero when it comes to the running game. Like I do think he's going to be out there getting some of those carries between the 20s where he is an explosive player. He can come up with big plays. And then I look at and think about offensive sets where we've seen teams utilize both a heavy back like a Mark Ingram and an Alvin Kamara, both on the field at the same time, and they run different offensive sets where they can utilize Gibbs' speed to the outside more and get to the edge and score while they have the battering ram, like they'll use a Montgomery there in the middle. We've also talked a lot about how last year, Jamal Williams had, the second most touches inside the 5 of any player, and it was almost double the next running back. So what are the odds that we see the Lions with that many opportunities inside the 5-yard line? If they're at the 10-yard line, are they more likely to use a dynamic player like Gibbs on the field than with a guy like Montgomery, who has shown the ability to catch football, obviously, in his time with Detroit, or Chicago, but obviously Gibbs has that more of that prioritized skill set there. So he could be being drafted correctly. It's just that the hype and the argument is like, wow, he's the number one guy, and it's like, well, maybe he's not, right?
Yeah,
but he can still be there.
I think the reasonable way to look at it is to say that it's probably a split, but you can also say that if I were going to look around this league, and we have seen it multiple times, we've seen Mark Ingram finish RB7 and Alvin Kamara finish RB3. I've seen Tevin Coleman and Devonta Freeman be relevant at the same time. I've seen Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt both finish as essentially back-end RB1s. If I was going to pick one team in the league to be able to do that, I would look around and say, who has a good line? with like
Right.
Frank Ragnow and Penei Sewell. I'd say who has a QB that has zero mobility and zero interest in QB sneaks even, and loves dumping it down in Jared Goff, which is basically what we had with Drew Brees, right? He had no interest in holding on to that ball any longer than he wanted to. And that's why Kamara routinely, I mean, back-to-back years of 83 catches, right? So I look at that, and that's the team I would pick. So that's the argument in favor, is that if any team's going to do that, that's the team.
Yep, I would agree with you. What's your thoughts on the Seattle situation? Obviously, everybody was all bullish on Kenneth Walker going into the year. Yay, Kenneth Walker, RB1. And then Hammer gets dropped. They draft the running back in Zach Charbonnet. Now, obviously, Walker dealing with an injury. Charbonnet's back out there. How do you find that rotation, split, workload, depth chart planning out?
I mean, honestly, I'm actually more willing to draft Charbonnet at his ADP than Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, I wouldn't rank Charbonnet ahead of Gibbs. That's a different question, right? Sure. That's what makes this game so hard. And that's why, to be honest, I'm not going to name any particular websites, but there are some websites that have this contest where you just rank guys and get points for where they're ranked. And, picking the tight end 9 and having them finish tight end 9 is a good thing, even though it doesn't help anybody in their fantasy leagues. Things like that don't appeal to me. I'm more of let's figure out how to create a balanced roster with both guys you can start and upside. Let's figure out how to get value at ADP. And Charbonnet is a guy where I look at it and I say, hey, there's a real possibility that David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs are splitting this workload where it skews more towards David Montgomery on rundowns and more towards Gibbs on pass downs, which is what you got with like Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, or DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams.
Yeah.
And I basically just say, hey, there's a world where Kenneth Walker is David Montgomery and Zach Charbonnet is Jahmyr Gibbs in that role. And the productivity is not that far off, even though the ADP is drastically far off. So more willing to take Charbonnet and just hope that Charbonnet is a stud. Obviously, the downside, though, is we've seen Pete Carroll pull the rug on us even more drastically before. Right. Remember, Chris Carson was a starter. They draft Rashad Penny in the first. And then Carson just flat out beat him out. Even when Carson was fumbling, that was his job. So we've seen this particular coach say, I do not care about draft capital one bit. That's what scares me, versus Brad Holmes going out and drafting Gibbs. So, it's more risk, but the possibility that these guys contribute in fantasy on the same level isn't as crazy as people make it seem. Sure. People make you seem crazy for suggesting that these guys could have similar seasons.
The Miami Dolphins running backfield is obviously, I think, still in flux because we just don't know where Dalvin Cook's going to land. And he's a guy that a team that has been linked to Dalvin Cook here. They drafted A-Chain, obviously, this year. They still have Mostert and Wilson. What Miami running back are you drafting right now, or is it a full fade until Dalvin Cook ends up somewhere?
It's not a full fade. I like taking a mix here. Obviously, if I can get A-Chain at a good price, then I do it. Because the upside. I mean, like, he's so cheap. Even considering the steam and everything, he's still cheap. Like, you're not drafting him to start for you. That's what matters for me, is with Gibbs, you can get hurt pretty bad. Some people are where he's going. He could be your RB1, right? So, and even if you draft him as your second RB, he's in your lineup every week. That's what you're expecting. Whereas a guy like A-Chain, where you can take him as your RB3, 4, and that's all you were looking for is upside. I want people to recognize that there's a world where the team likes what they have already. They like Raheem Mostert as their guy in space, and they like Jeff Wilson, and they're drafting A-Chain as a Raheem Mostert insurance, which he's a speedy space guy. He's very good. He has 4 plays of 50+ yards. He had the 2 fastest on-field speeds a couple years ago in 2020, and last year he had a 67-yard touchdown against the Bills, right? I think he might have got tackled, but a 67-yard play against the Bills. Like, there's a possibility that that's what they want, is they want insurance for the guys they have, which in redraft is scary. In Dynasty, I'm all in because Mostert is made of glass and he's 31 now.
Yeah, every year we see like a backup running or a backup running back or an incoming rookie running back kind of get a little bit more hype, and it ends up seeing the lead running backs ADP fall. I feel like we're seeing that now in Jacksonville, where Travis Etienne has been soured upon by the fantasy community, and Tank Bigsby is the one that people are more clamoring about as their big sleeper running back this season. Where do you fall in the Jacksonville backfield, man? Yeah,
the running back highlights and it's okay to get excited about highlights. I want everyone to know that, because there's too much negativity when it comes to that. It's okay if Jack Smith-Njigba makes a one-handed catch, that's awesome, right? But just keep in mind that with some of these running back drills and some of the quarterback drills, they've been told, the defense has been told, please don't injure this guy. Like, please, you know what I mean? Like, please don't dive at this guy's knees. Okay. So when I see Deuce Vaughn running through the line and everyone's just kind of trying to poke the ball out a little bit and they're not actually like hitting him, you gotta remember that some of these smaller guys, especially Deuce Vaughn, but Jahmyr Gibbs isn't that big either. Like there's a real possibility that day one comes around and this isn't college football anymore. And these guys are animals, right? Like Aaron Donald hits you, you might need a couple plays. So for me, the Tank Bigsby highlights are cool, but I love the idea that I can get ETN for cheaper because
I agree.
Trevor Lawrence, I'll tell you what, man, like when you're a franchise quarterback like that, you have some say. And there's no question in my mind that he was involved in the process of drafting ETN and he's going to have his back.
I agree with you 100%. Talk to me about these final running backs here, your dart throws, your stashes. Where are you going? Kendre Miller, Roschon Johnson, Chase Brown, Zach Evans, Dwayne McBride, all guys at the rookie ADPs that are getting a little bit of love at times.
Yeah, the problem with Roschon is that Justin Fields, he is who we thought he was, right? And Luke Getsy did what we thought he would do, which is call a million run plays with the quarterback. It's what he did when he was at Mississippi State. And that really saps the upside of, so you're basically buying 1/3 of a lottery ticket that to a, where it's a scratch ticket where you win $100, not $1 million, right? Because I don't think the back is going to get a ton of receptions, right? The Bears were bottom 3 in passes to the running back last year, and they have Khalil Herbert, they have Donta Foreman, so kind of out on Roschon. I do like the idea of in best ball of Dwayne McBride because everyone hates him because he didn't really catch many passes, and when I say not many, almost not any, right? Like he caught 2 his senior year, but he had 1,700 rushing yards. Why can't that guy be Alfred Morris or Jeremy Hill? Sure. I mean, Lufa's on board with it.
Yeah, Lufa's all about it.
Lufa's says he's got that dog in him. So I'll let you wrap this one up while my dog freaks out.
Yeah, that's fine. Listen, I think the one thing with the Minnesota backfield is that they've shown that unless their lead running back gets hurt, their lead running back is their lead running back. So a lot of people who are high on Chandler or McBride, and then you look at the fact that Alexander Mattison will be the guy getting the majority of these carries here, just like Dalvin Cook was until Dalvin Cook would get injured. Mattison would get a handful of touches here or there. I don't see that changing in this offense. I've been a little bit more bullish on Mattison than I think most. So seeing these other backup running backs on the team get a little hype, I'm a little less buying in to that there. So you're muted here.
We're talking last round pick.
Yeah,
in a underdog or best ball 10 draft. Ideally, some of the ones that go like 22 rounds. I know underdog's 18, even 18. I mean, that's still a bit of a reach, but you're going with those crazy deep boys, right?
Yep. I agree with you 100%. So guys, that's the show today. Again, thank you all for tuning in. Thanks again, Jake Butt out there joining us. Hopefully we can get him on again sometime this season. You know where to find Coop and I all over Fantasy Alarm. Get us on Twitter. We'll talk to you all next week. See you then.